Hello, I'm Dale Yurton, and welcome to our study on fruit that lasts. I'm giving you 3 lessons. If you have not seen the previous lesson, please go back and watch that as these lessons build upon each other. Talking about times of transition during the leadership's duties. This is one of the most delicate times that any leader is going to face. I'm calling this lesson Passing the Baton. Passing the baton, and we're using the analogy of a marathon, a relay race, where one runner has run his pace, and now it's time for him to hand off the baton to the next runner. That's one of the most delicate times in any race, and many times that's in the transition where the race is either won or it is lost. I want to use for a text today the Gospel of John, the 15th chapter and verse 16. Jesus is talking about producing fruit, and he says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you." Now, know what he says there. God's desire, God's will is for us to be productive and produce fruit. But it is not enough to be fruitful. It should be fruit that remains. And one of the ways that the fruit will remain will be determined by the transition. How well we are able to handle our responsibilities, then pass them on to someone else. I think it's a good statement that the greatest need in every church is a committed, well-trained leadership that is culturally relevant. Now, I want to focus on 2 or 3 words there. They, of course, need the devotion of being committed. They need to be well-trained. But this last phrase, culturally relevant, is very important with the subject that we're talking about. Remember the words of Jesus when he was talking about Jerusalem, and he's weeping over the city because they have rejected his leadership. They have rejected him as being their Messiah. In Luke, the 19th chapter, verse 44, Jesus said, "You did not know the time of your visitation." Boy, I've seen that so many times in my lifetime. In my ministry, I've seen so many times, and regretfully, I have to admit, there have been times when I missed it as well. What Jesus called the time of your visitation, your opportunity. This is your opportunity. It's your time. But unless we know what time it is, what's going on around us, if we are not culturally relevant, then we will miss the opportunity. And so let me give you some pointers here on ways that we can learn how to become culturally relevant. How do you do that? Culture is a language of its own, and we must learn to be able to speak it. If we're going to be able to speak the language of the culture, the first thing we need to do is to listen. To listen. If we're not paying attention to what's going on around us, then many times it's like we're deaf to what people are saying, what they're thinking about. And this is the tragedy that I have seen for so many leaders. They were good men, good women. They meant well. They loved God, and they actually cared for people. But they thought they already knew the answers. So they're not listening to anybody. A good question that we can ask ourselves is, what are the people reading? What are the people watching? What are they listening to? We need to pay attention. We need to ask some questions of our own and discover what is going on in the world around us. If we are not culturally relevant, It's like we're speaking a foreign language. We're answering questions that nobody is asking. It is estimated that in the time of Jesus, when he was here upon earth, that 75% of Jesus' world did not attend the synagogue. That is still pretty accurate, maybe even be less than that today. I was shocked many years ago to discover that 75% of all those that proclaim to be Jews are agnostics or atheists. That happened during World War II. They could not comprehend how that God would allow someone like Adolf Hitler to create the Holocaust. And so, because they couldn't find the answer, they dropped out of attending the synagogue. Now, that's not only a problem for the Jewish people, I believe it is a problem for the Christian community as well. That the majority of people that claim to be Christians don't attend church anywhere. But they're still talking. They're talking to someone. They're listening to someone. Now, Jesus was culturally relevant. Nobody was more aware of what was going on around them. Many times the Bible will speak and saying Jesus knew their thoughts. And that's how relevant he was. He could even tell what they were thinking. God help us to become culturally relevant so we're able to speak to the people that are around us. Now, the second most important thing for any leader is succession planning. What is your plan? How are you moving toward that plan? Because sooner or later, we're going to have to pass the baton to someone else. As one man said, every pastor is a departing pastor. And that is true. It's not only true of pastors, it's true of any leader. That we're not going to be here forever. No, it doesn't matter if you spend years or just weeks and months as the leader. Every leader is a departing leader. It's a matter of when, not if. You must understand that it's going to happen, and it will either happen with your leadership or it will happen without your leadership. It's during times of transition that we should be our best as leaders. We've got to answer the question, what's going to happen to the church that we've given our lives to build? What's going to take place when I can no longer be the leader? Am I going to leave it in good hands? Is there going to be good succession? I've discovered in my own personal ministry that the greatest success that I've experienced has come from training leaders. And I've devoted the majority of my life to doing this all around the world, training spiritual leaders, training Bible students, training pastors, how we can do a better job at what God has called us to do. See, the truth is, the size of our church is going to depend on how many leaders we can train. We've got to understand that's one of our biggest responsibilities. And if we're continually developing new leadership, the new leaders will be attracting new people. It's estimated that every new leader will reach 35 new people. Some, of course, more, others less, but that's an approximate average. 35 new people by every person that you're able to train and equip for ministry. And so we can say the health of our church depends on the quality of the people we are training. We've got to be looking, as Jesus did, for disciples. We've got to discover the 70 those that we can give an assignment to that can help us fulfill our goal. So God help us in learning how to develop leadership. In this lesson, I want to conclude by talking about 6 principles on successful succession. These are principles. If we put these into practice, it will make things go a lot smoother. It will help us through some of the difficulties if we understand these principles. Here's point number 1. Point number 1, honor your predecessor. Oh yes, you didn't get here alone. You had some help getting here. That's true of every one of us. It's not only true in the natural that we all have a father and a mother, but it is also true in the spiritual. So why should we pretend that we got here by ourselves? Learn to speak well of him. It's very easy to be critical about the things that we don't like. That doesn't work well. That's not a good policy. Look for the good things that you can speak well of him, because it won't be long, my friend. You're going to be in the same situation, and you will reap what you sow. And much of that, we reap it in this lifetime. So learn to speak well of him. Listen for good things that are spoken about him. There are some people that love him dearly. In fact, for some people, he's the only pastor they've ever known. He's the one that led them to Jesus Christ. He's the one that helped them from spiritual infants as they grew and matured. So listen to the good things that are spoken about him. And this brings me to the next point is confirm his work. Look for things that you can build upon that he has done. As I said, it is very easy for us to fall into a negative trap and look for the things that we don't understand why they did that. Well, one of the things that's happened is there's been years that have gone by usually, and in those years, cultural changes. And as the culture changes, we have to adapt the way that we minister to people. And so this brings me to my second point. My second point is build on health. I'm afraid that too many churches actually turn into medical clinics, or some of them even hospitals. And it's good to help people. It's wonderful to help heal the hurting. But what are you going to do with them once they're well? Go looking for more sick people? Or are you going to continue to build upon the people that God has given to you? So learn to build on health. In other words, look for the things that your predecessor did that was good. Look for the things that they accomplished. Build on those things. Now, if we're going to do so, we must understand the 4 different stages of organizational change. This happens for every leader. You can't have change without going through these different stages. The first one, A, would be external denial. In other words, we pretend like nothing is happening. Everything is saying the same, that nothing is changing. That's not true, my friend. We're in the midst of change, and sometimes it's big change, radical change, change that is forced upon us. But it's the first stage, the external denial. We don't like it. The second point, point B, would be internal resistance. Now, at this stage, we're no longer vocal and speaking out. We have progressed from that stage, or hopefully so. The next stage, it's internal. We resist change because it is difficult. And it is difficult. It's a true saying. If this was easy, everybody would be doing it. And that's true. So at this stage, you're beginning to recognize and accept the fact some things are changing, but I still don't like what's going on. And that brings us to the third stage. C, it would be what I would call internal exploration. Now we're asking questions. Questions like, what will these changes be, and how will they affect me? And they will. Things are going to be different now. Things are changing. How does that affect my relationship with the church, with the pastor? What positions am I going to be able to serve with this new leadership? We have to find the answers to our questions. And then the fourth one, D, is external commitment. Now we've worked through these phases of being resistant, of opposing it, and finally accepting the fact that it's here, something is changing. But it's a true statement. We tend to embrace new ideas when they are no longer new. Oh, that is so true. When they're no longer new, things have changed, and now we realize I'm in a different situation now. The church is changing, and I can either change and be effective, or I can continue to resist and pretend like nothing has changed. That's an exercise in futility. Change will happen with you or without you. Find where you best can serve and continue to follow Christ. Now, the third thing that I see in this successful succession is complete the past. Now, I've been focusing on the change into the future. Let's look at some of the things from the past that needs to be cleaned up, to be completed, to be finished. We don't just drop it because things have changed. No, we complete that. See, for Jesus, the past was neither a whipping post that he blamed for everything, nor was it a prison that he was locked into the past and could not change. Jesus did not look at change this way. He looked at transition completely differently than the people had done in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, in the times of the kings, my. So many times they dealt with succession by assassination. And so many people still think like that just because a new baby was born, we've got to kill grandpa. No. That you've got to think of family. Grandpa's still here. How can he continue to be a blessing to the family without the family dying with grandpa? Neither of those options are good. So the way Jesus dealt with it, Jesus dealt with the past by completion. By completion. Here's what I mean. Look at the law of Moses. He didn't attack the law of Moses. In fact, he said, I did not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. Look at his relationship with John the Baptist. Jesus looked at John's work as being preparatory for his work. He's not attacking John. No, he builds upon it and he completes what John has begun. So that's the way we need to look at it. Here's the fourth thing. If we're going to have successful succession, we need to envision abundance. Realize God's leading us somewhere. What is the new vision? It should build upon the past. It should build upon the things that we've already accomplished. You don't keep tearing down the first floor and starting over with a new foundation. No, build on what has been given to you. Create a very good vision. See, there must be a clear vision if it's worthy of being followed. A clear vision. You've got to be able to articulate that, to communicate that, to be culturally relevant. Speak it in a way that they understand. Without the vision, the people will perish. And without the people, the leadership will fail. Now here's the fifth point that I want to talk about. I call this creating capacity. And this ties in with building on the strengths, what was done, completing the projects that was started, and having the right attitude of fulfillment. Create capacity. You're taking the vision that God has given you to the next level, to the next step. It says in Mark, the 3rd chapter, verse 14 of Jesus, then he appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach. Notice he appoints 12. They were called, first of all, his disciples, then the 12 apostles. Now, what was Jesus doing when he's out picking out these 12 men? They were all handpicked by Jesus after lengthy times of prayer, seeking God. He chooses 12 that they might be with him is the first assignment. They're going to learn from him personally. Then he's going to send them out to do what he has been doing. What is Jesus doing? Jesus is multiplying himself. Now listen to me very carefully. If you don't hear anything I say other than this in this lesson, this is worth your time. If Jesus did it, why aren't you following his example? Do you think you're better than Christ? That you know more than Christ? Of course we don't. Then why don't we do what Jesus said? Somebody said, but I tried that one time and I was betrayed. Jesus was too. And if Jesus had his Judas, who do you think you are that you will not have yours? But Jesus did not focus on Judas. He focused on the other 11, and he kept training and equipping. He was multiplying himself. And it's one of the main reasons why churches remain small, that they don't grow, is because one person can only do so much. If you want to do more, you've got to do what Jesus did. The Greek word appointed here is a word that literally can be made to create. He looks at them and he sees their potential. They weren't there. No. Even I read in amazement as he's facing the cross and he's trying to prepare them for ministry after he's gone. And what are they doing? They're debating among themselves, which one of us is the greatest? They're like children. They don't get it all, but he knows they will. They will be forced to do it. So he saw their potential and he built upon it. God help us to follow the example of Jesus and start creating capacity for more leadership. Here's the sixth point I want to share with you. And I've saved this one to the last because I call it fight the demons. Fight the demons, and you will have to. As I stated earlier, this is not easy. If it was, a lot more people would be doing it. It's not easy. It's difficult. And the devil will make sure you find that. You'll find he's going to fight you every step of the way. It's during these times of change and transition that it produces tension. Tension because things are not the same. I don't know if you've ever experienced an earthquake, but I tell you, earthquakes are really earth-shaking events. When the ground beneath us that we think is so substantial, we think of it as being so solid, when it starts moving, boy, that changes everything. Well, the same is true with leadership. Change and transition produce tension because things are changing. Now, the majority of these problems are usually going to be either emotional or spiritual. It's usually a combination of both. It's usually not the problem of the money, not the problem of the facilities. Of course, all those things factor into leadership. No, it's usually emotional or spiritual. I want to encourage you because Jesus faced the same thing. When Jesus was looking at everything is changing, he's just been anointed by the Holy Spirit. He goes into the wilderness. Why? To be tempted of the devil. What's happening? It's changing from John the Baptist to Jesus the Messiah. Look at the end of his natural ministry when he is facing the cross. That was one of the greatest struggles of his life, when sweat turned to blood. Don't think that we're going to get off easy. The devil will attack us as well. And so we see Jesus' greatest struggles came during times of transition. It's during the transition time when you're going to be attacked. What do you got to do? Fight the devil. Stand up. Don't allow the devil to take leadership, to take control. No. Stand like Jesus stood and understand that Jesus' victory becomes our victory. Remember what Jesus said in John 14 and 19? Because I live, you will live also. He is encouraging his disciples. He knows what's going to happen. They don't. He's going to die. He's going to be buried. Oh, but that's not the end of the story. There will be a resurrection. He's coming out of the grave, and he's saying, because I've done it, you can do it. Because I live, you will live also.